All right, Sean Gallagher. It's the New York Pilates studio. It used to be Pilates Inc.
Mhm.
You know, that's
Very.
so basically that's what I've been doing this for let's see, probably about 30 years almost.
Okay. Yeah.
34 to be
34.
exact. Yeah.
There you go. And you were like yeah, PT is personal trainer in Canada, but physical therapist, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
in the US you can't use PT unless you're a physical therapist.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got into Pilates, when I was in PT school. In '84, a friend of mine that I was staying with, it was really a friend of my mother's, in New York. I was taking dance class across the street. He was at Bank Street, was where Merce Cunningham's studio was. So I'd go and stay at his apartment. And he had this article from GQ magazine about this exercise system that dancers use to prevent injuries and stay in shape. And that's what I was in PT school for. I was, a dancer. So
Oh, were you? Okay.
and it was Pilates. So
Yeah.
I went in '86, and then since then I've been, ever since.
Nice. Who was your first teachers in Pilates? Like, I love hearing people's
Well,
stories of their
my
first Pilates.
main teacher in the beginning was Steve Giordano,
Okay.
and he and I eventually we in '90 we went into business together. It didn't last long because there were issues,
Yeah.
but we started, and so I always had Pilates as part of my PT practice. There was always it was PT and Pilates together.
Yeah. 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 Cool. Now, I guess everyone talks about this whole dialogue between contemporary and classical. Would you say, like, your first experience of it, was it like classical or contemporary when
Well,
you first went to it?
it was Ramana. So I mean,
Okay.
I started working. Steve and Ramana and I started working before I bought the trademark. We had a business called Synergy Exercise Systems,
Okay.
and Ramana would come and do trainings. I have probably 15 or 20 tapes that we taped her in the beginning.
Hmm.
Of the different trainings and workshops that we did with her, and then afterwards as well. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was as close to the source as I could get.
Yes.
I did one session, I got off the machine, and I'd been training in Nautilus and Cybex and free weights in PT school,
Yeah.
but as a dancer, it didn't make it didn't really, it just didn't fit me well. It didn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, there was a guy I danced with, and we'd go to the gym together, and we'd do the same workout. And the next day, he'd be like bulging, and I'd be like, I don't have anything. So it
Yes.
didn't work for me that much. I mean, I'd have to. Some people when they pump, they get pumped right away, and other
Yeah.
people, it depends on the tone of your muscles and your nervous system, and so not
Yeah.
everybody reacts the same way. So I was always getting frustrated with that, and
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
got off the Pilates machine, and I felt everything working together, and I was like, this is amazing. This should be everywhere. Why isn't this everywhere? And then
Right.
I said, if
Right.
I ever get a chance to bring it everywhere, I'm going to do that, and I got the chance, and
Hmm.
we did. Ramon and I, we took it around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. See some people coming in now. Hey, Leslie. Very cool. Yeah, so I watched some of your live yesterday. Is it now? Tell me about these lives that you're doing on the Friday, on the Monday nights.
On the Monday, well, Monday first, Elaine and I have been doing a return to life class. So
Okay.
people come to that, and then afterwards I do this. And basically, it started in response to Mr. Steele's book because, he said it was a memoir and history. The
Okay.
problem is his history is terrible, and it's incorrect, and it's just false, a lot of it.
Okay.
I mean, I read the book, and I have the document. I'm the fifth owner of the original Pilates business, the studio
Okay.
business, right? It
Yeah.
was when Joe to Clara, she sold 239 Corp, which was Mr. Steele and I don't know if okay, Mr. Steele and
Yeah.
Ramana. They were Ramana was 50% owner, and then they had shareholders.
Yeah.
Mr. Steele was one. That went through like three different names, and then they sold it in '85 to Aris Isotoner, the
Hmm.
glove guys. That was
Yes.
also owned by Sarah Lee. So, and after about a year and a half, it wasn't making any money. But they originally bought it. They were going to franchise it and do all these other things.
Right.
They were the ones. Well, really, Romana and Mr. Steele were the ones who first trademarked the name Pilates and sent letters, cease and desist letters.
Okay.
And then when Larry Stanton bought it and Aris Isotoner bought it, they even sued, they sued somebody to stop them from doing it.
Hmm.
Then they sold it to We Tai Home, who was another client, and he had all these great ideas. One of his ideas was what he wanted to do was put a TV in front of the reformer
Okay.
and be able to put a tape in so people could watch and do their workout. So very, very
Yeah.
prolific considering
Right.
what's going on today, right? But this
Right.
was
Right.
in 1980, 86. So it was way before, anybody was thinking of doing anything like that. So
Mm,
Weetai was, he had some good ideas. The problem was he didn't focus on what he had, which was Pilates, and that, and the way to make Pilates grow was to open other studios and do teacher training and really focus on it. And he
yeah.
had started a training. I mean,
Mm,
Amy and Rachel from Boulder and Moyer Stott, they all did the basic training with Rahman and Weetai, which was just the reformer and the mat.
right.
I have copies of their certificates because again, I have all those records. So,
Right. Right.
that basic training was just, the reformer and Matt, and they used the pictures. The only pictures they had were from the Gail Ice and Philip Friedman, book from the 80s as well that they put into that manual.
Okay.
So that's, where, so that's where it all comes from. And then, I bought it in 92 and, first thing I did was open in LA. We developed a training manual, and comprehensive training manual and teacher training program to really make it a
Yep.
professional. Because being a PT, I'd also done training as a Feldenkrais practitioner,
Mm,
and I was an athletic trainer, so I had done a lot of different things
different
and saw,
modalities.
well, different professions, right? They are
Yeah.
all
Very true.
separate professions,
Yeah.
and they each have their, way of doing things. And so I developed the first code of ethics and standards of practice for Pilates way
Mm,
before the PMA and any of those people, on any other thing that's out there, the PTA, all that stuff, and
yeah.
if you look at mine, you look at theirs, you can see the relationships, just like a lot of the trainings.
Mm,
If you see a training that has, hundreds of hours and they have basic, intermediate, advanced, and you have testing at 2, 4 and
right.
6 and all that, well, that all started with Steve, I, and Ramana.
Right.
That's where
Right.
it all started.
Right.
So,
So when you're saying like the past owners with their cease and desist letters,
hmm
what was the objective of that? To stop people from
well,
using the name per
yeah,
se, or to
when
stop
you,
doing the exercises without their name? Like
no. So the way it works, if you want a trademark, right,
yes,
you have to protect it. If you don't protect it, you lose it.
right.
That's how it works. That's the law.
Mhm.
And so, and they trademarked, Ramana and the 939 Corp, that business with Larry Stanton as the lawyer was part of this. They trademarked the name Pilates. And the first application was 1980, right? I
Okay.
didn't buy it till 92, so 12 years later.
Hmm.
So you have to protect it.
Hmm.
Otherwise you lose it. And so that's what they did. They sent letters. I have those letters. They sent to different, they sent a letter to San Francisco Hospital with James Garrick and these other people.
Hmm.
A couple other people and people in New York. There wasn't that many, but there was, and they sent letters.
Yep.
And then Fran Leon, fought it, and they, sued her in court, and they settled.
Yeah.
And just so, and the reason why, part of the reason why I said it is because, the PMA and the balanced body, dialogue has always been that I tried to, trademark Pilates. Well, I didn't trademark, I bought a trademark. It was
Hmm.
federally registered trademark that had been registered for a long time. I bought it.
Okay.
And I followed exactly what those before me had done, which
Yeah.
was Aris Isotoner and Ramana and Mr. Stanton and that group. They all did the same thing. I just followed it. The difference was by the time I did it, there was a lot more people doing it.
Yes.
So I sent a lot more letters,
Right. Right.
cease and desist, and there was one or two people that I didn't send a letter to. Like there's one, well-known Pilates teacher today that, I had a client, dancer from Paul Taylor's dance company.
Hmm.
He came into my studio and he said he saw Pilates. He says, "Oh, I don't." I try to get him to do this. No, I don't do it because I lost my front teeth doing Pilates in this woman's studio. She didn't have a safety chain on the push-through bar.
Yep. Good.
So, I didn't waste time because, if you have a trademark and somebody is using your name and somebody gets injured, well, that
Then you're
brings
liable.
it's a bad, it's bad for your trademark.
Right.
So she
Right.
didn't get a letter right away. I just sued her right away and, basically said, you need to stop,
Right. Right.
and then
Right.
she
Right.
fought me. So, and she was, big thing at that time. So that's really part of, what happens. I was following the law, doing
Hmm.
what I needed to do to protect, my investment. I bought a business, right?
Right.
I bought a business, it had value, and the majority of what I bought the business for was for the trademarks.
Yes.
Um, because that to me was there was value there.
Yeah.
When I bought the business, I also got, all the records.
Yeah.
So I had a number, all the client cards, right? And I think I mentioned this yesterday, the client cards
Mhm.
where everybody came in, there was 40 years worth of client cards.
Yes.
And, 40 years, I mean, as a business, I was like, I don't need this. So I threw
Mhm.
it out. I got rid of it. Which was probably about 80% of the materials that I got. But the 20% that I got, right? And
That
this
was
was, that was all the negatives
yeah, the
and the
rich stuff.
film, the stuff that, that stuff I didn't throw away.
Right.
Like an old, I know that like Siri Dharma, gives me a hard time all the time. He threw away 80% of the archives. And it
Mhm.
was funny because there was before Facebook, there was a Pilates group that people would talk about, and she talked about how she threw, she had all these old client records in her garage that she threw away because they weren't, she didn't need them anymore, and it was
Yeah.
taking up space. Well, that's kind of what I did, and
Yeah.
most businesses do. If you buy a business, you got 40 years worth of records and these old client files. These people are died, they moved, it's like,
Yeah.
and this is before the
It's
internet, so it's not like you
right.
can connect.
Right.
You'd have to go through each one, send them a letter, pay all that money to
Yeah.
do a mailing to find out whether they're still even there anymore.
That's true. So just looking back on what you're saying though, like you bought a business, but it's almost like at the same time you bought a business, but there was a movement as well as a business that was happening at the same time.
Well, it was starting to. I mean, it didn't. There were people out there doing it for
Right.
sure. And
So
what I did, look, I wasn't. This is this junk that they tried to talk to people about. If there was social media back then, it would have been a much different story.
right.
Because I didn't, basically they were telling people he's going to, if he wins, you're not going to be able to teach Pilates, which was totally false.
Okay. You just
You
couldn't use the
might,
name Pilates.
you could even say Pilates base. You just couldn't say Pilates. You could teach anything and just like today.
Right.
You could continue to teach. I mean, look, there's McDonald's, there's Burger King, there's Wendy's, and there's Five Guys. They all have the same product. They have a different brand. They basically are giving you the same thing in a slightly different way. But it's basically the same thing. Well, that's how the system works.
Right.
They made it sound though like if I won, you were not going to be able to make a living or do any of this stuff, which is just not the case.
Right.
And look
But
at
there's enough
even
fear at that time around that. I mean, like, you get a
well
lawyer's letter.
but they also they use that fear to try to get people to be on their side.
Mhm.
And I can't tell you how many people recently in the last couple of years have come to me and said, seeing what's happened in Pilates, I wish you would have won,
Yeah.
right? Because
Now,
you know
wishing you would have won would have enforced the name. Was that going to just also enforce like this, the quality of delivery of it as well? Like, I mean, like,
here's the thing, right? When you lose what does the trademark give you? Gives you a quality control.
right.
That's what it does.
Yeah.
I mean, you may not like McDonald's,
Mhm.
but when you walk into a McDonald's, you know exactly what you're getting,
Yeah. Wherever you go on the
right?
planet, same thing.
Like
Yep.
the arches, the packaging, the material, it's like you get a Big Mac wherever you go, it's a Big Mac.
Right. Right.
Well, and that was the plan, was to be able to say, if you went into a Pilates studio, you were going to get what Joe taught,
Yes.
or as close to that as possible.
Right.
And then you lose the trademark, and anybody can call anything Pilates, and they do, and it's
Right.
getting it's getting worse and worse. You get online stuff, couple hours, you got a certificate. I'm a
Right.
certified Pilates teacher. Clubs, as long as you got a certificate, that's all they're worried about.
Mhm.
The training that I had, one of the things that we did with the training with Ramon is that it evolved over a period of time because of what
Right.
we learned. Every year we would meet with the studio owners and the teachers of teachers, right? And
Yes.
that grew over the years.
Right.
And when we first started, there was no prerequisite.
Mm.
By the time Ramana moved on to go with her daughters to do Ramana's Pilates, you had to have at least 70 hours of sessions before you could even be considered to come.
to qualify to take the course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You
right.
had to know
Yeah,
what because the training wasn't to teach you Pilates, it was to teach you how to teach Pilates, which is different than learning the exercises. So
right.
in the beginning, we would have people come that had no experience,
Mhm.
and you had people that had years of experience and good training. It really was not.
Yeah,
It
you got to
didn't work.
balance that
It
out.
did not
Yeah.
work well. So we changed. It grew
Mhm.
over time.
Right.
We did a number of things that way.
Right. So what about other elders and like people who were contemporaries of Ramana and what they were teaching? So if you like, were you saying at that point then because you wrote a manual and because you standardized it that you were the only person with like you were the gatekeeper for the true Pilates at that point, or like what does that mean for other contemporaries of Joseph Pilates?
Here's the thing. There's a number of things to consider, and the reason why I chose Romana. Um, and even in Mr. Steele books, it's clear. He went to Ron Fletcher and as supposedly as a representative for the business. So he was the lawyer and a
Okay.
part owner, and he went and looked, and he basically says in the book that Ron changed a lot of things, and he did.
Okay.
But when he went back to New York to report to Romana and Clara, he lied and said, "Oh yeah, it was great. He did a great job." I
Mm,
mean, so, these are the issues, right? So,
right.
and the problem is, and I don't have any problem with that. Change it the way you want. But, a lot of the elders, they didn't do Pilates until Pilates became popular. They did their own methods. Ron Fletcher method, Eve Gentry method, which was a lot of other stuff besides Pilates.
Okay.
It would have this stuff. So they changed it. Then when their methods didn't take off, but Pilates did, what did they do? They came back and then started teaching Pilates, but they brought all that other stuff with them, saying
Right.
that that's Pilates. And and you can now because Pilates is a generic term, but it's not what Joe taught. And
So then,
that's
okay,
the difference.
and I hear that because then people do that and they sprinkle in their exercises and Eve stretch, for example, is something that gets taught. And it's like, well, Joseph didn't teach that. He taught that to whatever. So I see examples of that. But then what about someone like Kathy Grant or Lolita, people who are actually certified
Well,
by Joseph Pilates?
okay, so you got two people who were certified by the state. Joe
Okay.
signed the thing, but they weren't certified by Joe. They were certified by the state. That you need to make that's
Okay.
the clarification,
What does
which
that
is
mean?
they. Well, that basically means they went through. The New York State has a program that when like for dancers,
Hmm.
like now they have it's called career transition for dancers. Your dancing career is ending. They will give you grant money to be able to go and then do another, profession change to
Okay.
become something else. So that Lolita and Kathy both applied to that, and Joe agreed. So he did sign the thing saying that they had finished the program, but the certification came, as far as if you look at the thing, it's from New York State. It's not a certificate from Joe Pilates. It's a New
So
York
th-
State
so
certificate.
so they're not certified
To,
by Joseph Pilates.
as far as I know, that certification came from the state to say, and Joe said that they had done the work to do it, but that their certificate was, that came from the New York State. But he was part of that. So, it's a technicality. But that being said, now, I mean, Lolita is a perfect example. Okay, she got trained, she did it for a year, and then she moved to Puerto Rico and taught ballet for 30 years with her ballet company. Maybe she taught Matt, I don't know, I wasn't there, but she didn't have apparatus, she didn't have equipment. So she didn't do it for 30 years. She had to come back and do two trainings to remember everything. And so when I see Lolita's legacy, well, that's it. It's Lolita's legacy. It's not Joe's.
Okay.
Because she's also, and they all add lots and lots of stuff. And that's fine. If that's what you want to learn and that's what you want to do, no, that's not, I don't have an issue with that. I
Right.
mean, Joe's work, you modify for the individual always.
Of
This
course.
is, yeah,
Right.
but there's been a perception in social media and everywhere else from the contemporary people that Pilates, what Joe taught is rigid. There's only one way to do it. You have to follow this order. Well, Joe had numerous orders for the numerous apparatus because I have the archives and I can show you that, and I have the posters and everything else. It's a
Mhm.
lot different. It's not always the same because
Yeah.
it did change some, not a lot, but it did change.
Yeah.
And, the way Ramana taught was that you had to modify for each individual. Like if somebody came in and they could do an advanced exercise and it was good for them, you could give them an advanced exercise.
Yeah.
She didn't have a problem doing that at all. So
Of
there's
course.
all sorts of variables.
Right.
So, and there's things that people say Joe didn't teach. It was Romano changed it, and she did change things because
Right.
she went to SUNY Purchase where you had an hour and 15-minute class,
Mhm.
and you got to teach mat. Well, if you're teaching Joe's mat, 34 exercise, how long does it take?
Yeah. It's not gonna take that
It's
long.
it's 3 to 8 repetitions. You're done in 35 minutes,
Right.
40 minutes tops.
Right.
So she had to, like I see you have a wall unit there, right?
Mhm.
Joe did not invent a wall unit. The wall unit comes from SUNY Purchase.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
was that was put in SUNY Purchase so that she could continue. She could teach more exercises without having to have 10 Cadillacs. You could do a
Yes.
wall unit. You put the push through bar, the roll back, roll down bar, the arm
Yeah.
springs, the leg springs. You could do a large majority of the Cadillac exercises in that kind of setting. So that's where that all starts. So that's, she developed that. So anybody
Yes.
who uses a wall unit is not doing what Joe taught. But is it wrong? Is it bad? Of course not.
Well, no, exactly. And I think that's, I've had a guest on here say that everything after Joseph Pilates is contemporary.
Well, of course it is.
Yeah, arguably it is, right? Because everyone is just adding their ripples to it. They're adjusting to the
Everybody.
people in front of them, all those different things. But I just want to circle back to, we mentioned Lolita a second ago. So what about Kathy Grant? I mean, you can see the body of
Well,
her work as
Kathy,
well.
well, yeah, but Kathy didn't do certification. She sent her students to Romanas on our training.
Okay,
I mean, that's how Blossom got to us. She did our training because Kathy said, if you want to get certified, you should go to Ramada.
right.
Because there was a time where there was integrity
Hmm.
in Pilates, not so much anymore. And, Ramada, it was the Pilates studio. That's where Kathy, that was her, she got trained there. She ran Bendel. She had her own studio. But when it came to teaching and certifying teachers, that's not what she did. She left that to the Pilates studio, which is where she got trained and certified,
Right.
and worked. And
Yes.
and that's what people did. And then, everybody's, looking to make a buck, right? So that's what
Right.
happens.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and as you could probably tell from my questioning, like I'm not so well like versed in the history and the origins
Hmm.
of, the lawsuit to this and the other, but like just from what I've learned and just understanding like Kathy Grant's legacy, and people talk about lineages and legacies a lot. It sounds like you are the gatekeeper, so to speak. Like everything passes
Well,
through you in terms of certifications, the name, all these different things. So
that's
there's a
what it would
fear
have
that
been.
comes with it, right? So as a result
Well,
of it, everything would be, I have to give it to him. I have to hand it over to Romana because this is the
yeah, but
gatekeeper
that,
of the
well, yeah.
Pilates world,
Well,
right?
I was the owner of the business, and if you wanted to use the name that was trademarked, that's how it works.
Yes.
If you want to go and do, you know,
McDonald's was a good example. Like that's exactly it. Like there's a
or church,
standardized thing. Yeah.
same as church. Church is the first franchise,
Mhm.
right? When you go to church, whatever church you belong to, whatever domination, whether it's Jewish or it's Catholic or whatever, Muslim, you name it.
Mhm.
What do you get when you walk in there?
Yeah.
The
There's
same thing.
right. Exactly.
Same prayers, same thing. That's, so it's the church, it's the church, it's McDonald. I mean, it's a quality control issue.
Yes.
And I was trying to control the quality of Joe's work. I still do. I
Right.
still control that because I have most of the archives and, in a sense of control. And, if you don't have control, what do you have?
Well, it's interesting, like that makes me think of two things. One, the sense of a movement versus a business, right? Like you're controlling
Hmm.
the business, but you can't control the movement
Well,
of Pilates, right? The
and I
same way as
haven't.
when you said,
And
like,
listen, I haven't for 20 years.
right? Well,
You
like
know,
we were
I
saying, like when you first got into it, you were like, well, this is great. Why aren't more people doing this,
right.
right? Like, so that experience that people have is a thing that becomes the
Well,
impetus for other people
and
wanting to do it,
you
right?
you have to realize that, and I'm sure at some point somebody probably would have made another manual. But
Yep.
the manual, I took that manual and this training around the world with Vermont.
Mhm.
We went to South America, we went to Europe, we went to Australia, we went everywhere. You
Yes.
know, so and all over the states. I
Mhm.
had at one point I had 8 different Pilates studios and some Pilates and PT.
Yep.
I was growing. I had plans to franchise. I had plans to do all that stuff.
Yes.
I had bought a wood shop and I was making equipment. I was reproducing Joe's original equipment because I bought his property in Beckett in '97, had his studio with all his original equipment in it still. The
Yeah, yeah,
clawfoot reformer, the high chair,
yeah.
I have the Bednasium, I have his Cadillac, push through bars, all that stuff.
So
So
cool. Yeah.
I made all that stuff. But that was before anybody was interested in classical because what happened is, the thing you have to realize about the PMA, Kevin Bowen started the PMA. Well, if you read his deposition
Mhm,
about how he talked to Romana
mhm.
and the teacher and her students and what she, and that, he basically said it was dangerous, it was unscientific, all this stuff. Well, that dichotomy between classical and contemporary, right,
Mhm.
started with the PMA and Kevin Bowen, because that's where that all started from. That was part of what they tried to put out there, was
Right.
that what we were doing was unscientific, it was old, you didn't know what you're doing, it's dangerous, you're not in, and I'm a PT and I can guarantee you I've spent the last 20 some years, 30 some years trying to figure out why it works so well, and most of the science is still trying to catch up with Joe.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Right.
that's part of the issue. Is for me is when I see that, I see there's a consistent dialogue to try to, downgrade the classical by the contemporary, and part of that was to market their programs
Okay.
because we're scientific, we're up to date, we're this, we're that, we're safe. Well, when you talk about that issue, well, if you market it that way, what are you saying to all those other people that were certified
Yeah.
in the classical?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a derogatory, negative connotation that you are unsafe, you are unscientific, and we're better,
Hmm. Yes. Yeah.
right? And that's an issue. I mean, that's really, when you look at it, that's an issue that you have to understand that's where that started from. Because at the
Yes.
time when the PMA started, I I had over, I already had a Pilates teachers organization, and it's still going. It's called the Pilates Guild,
The guild. Right. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And it had the first standards of practice, code of ethics.
Hmm.
You got trained by the training program, but then to stay certified, you had to be a guild member,
Mm.
right? So, and
Yeah.
again, it's no different than what the PMA is doing. The difference is the the dichotomy, and to me, it's almost funny, is that the PMA was started to stop me from being able to say what Pilates is. And what they're doing right now is exactly the same thing. They're trying
Okay.
to set it up so that and you're in Canada, so it's different. But
Yeah.
in the States, each state, if they regulate exercise, it's going to be different in each state. It's taken
Yes.
PT over almost 100 years to be nationally recognized test and everything else.
Right. Right.
So the PMA is trying to do that. And then if they do it, what they say is Pilates is what you're going to have to teach as Pilates,
Mm.
which is basically what they were accusing me of doing. And now they're basically gone full circle and they're doing exactly the same thing. Because
Yes.
if you don't want to teach that and you do it then in a state that is now licensed,
Yes.
then you're practicing illegally and you could be brought up for charges and be thrown out and not be able to practice anymore.
Right.
So that's
Yep.
when you talk about control, you know, my control was, if you want to use the name, this is what you're going to do. Their control now is if you use that equipment, you're
Right.
doing Pilates and you got to do it our way or you're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, but that's coming from your perspective. I'm sure from their perspective, they're saying we want to standardize it so that everyone has a common language and that it's done safely and that like everyone has the same kind of song and dance about it being done safely with standardized experience for everybody, right?
Well, that was already done.
Yeah.
They ruined that. They
Hmm.
threw that out the window. But when I lost the lawsuit, I had standards, I had practice, I was doing all those things.
Yeah.
And when you say that's their story, well, of course it is. But and
I don't know. I'm just saying like that's
yeah, but
probably like
and
everyone's gonna have
why
a yeah.
and you have to remember when they started,
Mhm.
anybody, no matter what their training was, could be a PMA member and Pilates teacher.
Right.
So
If
they
you could pass the
started this.
test, then you can.
They started all of this stuff.
Mhm.
All this stuff that they're trying. They're now trying to put Pandora back in the box. Is what they're doing.
Yeah.
Gonna have a rough time doing it because every state. And what they don't I don't think what they realize is that exercise is already part of PT, athletic training. So, and they're trying to go into states and get it regulated. Well, those people who are already doing it, when we're talking, this is politics,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
They are going to fight that tooth and nail to be able to let another person come in and take a piece of their pie.
Right.
Guaranteed.
Right.
Guaranteed.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's going to be tough.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, how did you lose this lawsuit then? Like, what was it? What was
Well,
the?
there was a number of issues.
Okay.
It wasn't one thing. I mean,
Okay.
partly we tie, right?
Hmm.
Well, let's define this a little bit. There was more than one trademark,
Okay.
and so there was a trade. I did register a trademark. It was a trademark for equipment,
Okay.
and that's the one that Current Concept was most worried about because he wouldn't be able to call his equipment Pilates. It would have
Oh,
been a
I
bit
see.
Pilates based. So that's
Yes.
this is where the money comes in. You got to realize that this is it's
Of course.
he was a big business back. He was big business back then. He's much bigger business now. Who made all the money?
Mhm.
When you have a lawsuit, there's a winner and loser. Somebody makes the money, somebody doesn't. I would have spent the
So,
money maintaining Joe's work and quality and everything else. He spent the money making up new equipment all the time. And what's even more ludicrous is now he's going back and trying to make the original equipment. So what's that say about all his innovations and all the other stuff that he did over the past 20 years with all his, all those old apparatus that he made? And
mhm.
now he's making Joe's, trying to make a copy of Grotz. I mean, that's just, again, it just makes me laugh
Right, and
because, I mean,
that's an homage to Jay Grimes, right? Like that's under Jay Grimes' name, and also
yes.
the
Well,
controlling
that,
stuff, right?
you're right. I mean, we can talk about Jay too. And Joe, Jay says he studied with Joe.
Yeah.
I've got a book right here. I think it's this one, right? That's a Pilates sign-in book,
Okay.
right? And let me see if I'm correct, if this is the right one. I think it is. Let's see. Let's see what years. Yeah, this should be it. 60. Oh, no, that's not it. Well, I can't get it out now. I've shown it before. Yeah, he's not signed into the book until after Joe died.
So you're saying he didn't train with
He
Pilates?
trained with, well, he trained with Clara and Romana for sure, but in
Right.
in the sign-in books, he wasn't there until after Joe had died. And all the other elders are in there before that, So, and Romana was in, when you came in the studio, you put your name in the book with your phone number and
Yep.
your address, so they could get in touch with you, right? That's what everybody did. I mean, I have,
So
I have probably, 20 of these,
right.
right? And this is good for, like a couple of years. This one starts, when does this start? This starts in 58 and goes to 63. So, I mean,
So
over the
this
years.
so does Grimes claim that he worked with Joseph Pilates,
Yes, he does.
and
So,
you're saying that he didn't, or you have no proof
well,
of it?
I'm not saying, all I'm saying is what the documents show us,
Okay.
because documents don't lie.
Right.
There's a signature, there's a date, in the book, and there's nothing before that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All the other elders, every time they came or if they moved, they came in and they put their name in, their new or old phone number, and their new address. That's how it worked at the studio,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's clear. I mean, you can see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he wasn't there until 68. Joe died in 67. So that's all I'm saying is, like, this is what the documents show. So people can take that any way they want,
Yeah.
but he's a first generation. He trained with Clara for sure. We know he trained with Clara and Romana. If he trained with Joe, maybe he did. I don't know. I don't have, the book doesn't show it that he does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And same thing with Sanjay, Sanja or Sanjay, whatever. She's not even
Uh-huh.
in the book.
Yeah.
So she claims of being there and that, she just sat and watched, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made to say, I study with Joe today.
Yes.
I train with Joe today. And
Interesting.
Jay Grimes used to, I don't think he says it anymore, but he would say, the archives are Joe's garbage. Well, if it was garbage, why did he take it all up to Massachusetts to his new studio? First of all, the old equipment. And to me, the reason why a lot of it is because I see some of the exercise that Jay teaches, and it's combinations of stuff all over the place, but it's not how Joe taught it.
Right. Right. Right.
It might have
So
been Clara, it might have been
yeah,
Romana, but at least as far as we know at the moment, because the funny thing about history is that things keep coming, they
yes,
surface.
right, right,
A
right,
picture here, a film here, a document, whatever. It still happens. People are looking, and if
right.
it's out there and there's value, somebody will find it. I mean, I have the largest collection of archives, of
Yeah,
Joe's because that was his business, and I bought it.
okay,
I am the source for that. That's the difference. That's why I now use the Pilates source because who else is a source?
right,
Who has that? Who has anything close? Nobody.
right,
And am
exactly,
I the gatekeeper? Well, I share. But it's I mean, if I wanted to, I could burn it all.
right.
It's like I own it. It's your house. You could. Well, I don't know if you could do that. I guess if you burnt your house, you'd probably get in trouble. But I mean, there's
I
certain
follow
things.
you though. But
Right.
yeah, but there's a sense of just like just being in like there's just I'm fascinated by your fascination with him, like with Joseph and his history and his archives and owning the business and that sense of being the gatekeeper and being the owner of the manual and just being able to just trying to just channel everything in one direction.
Well, listen, when I got off that apparatus and I felt the way I felt, I realized that this was it was amazing compared to anything else out there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it still is, as far as I'm concerned. It still isn't. Most of the stuff that's out there, it's based on it. But you know, the depth of his work and the depth of what he was able to do in his lifetime. Because this, when I see, people say, "Oh, I'm classically trained." Well,
mm-hmm.
really, it took Joe 40 years to do this, and you have 5 years of teaching. How do you have all of that information? How do you know all that?
Well, we're
And then, how
always
do you put it all together?
yeah, that's like a friend of mine is a jujitsu artist, right? Like, and he's like a black belt in jujitsu, and his line is, "I'm a white belt forever." Like, I can claim to be a classically trained Pilates instructor all day. That doesn't mean I've ceased to continue to learn after I've accomplished one level or one. Like, I can be in level one of my certification, get it, and say I'm classically trained. I'm still training.
Well, yeah, that's true. But are you training in classical or are you training in contemporary? Makes a difference.
Well, it doesn't matter. I could have done every class and I still continue to be training, right? Like I'm still in that
Well,
learning
I'll say a
journey, right?
perfect example. Perfect example. We are doing Pilates at the Pillow, right? These are conferences for Pilates teachers.
Right.
And what we've been doing, Elaine and I have been bringing back Joe's lost apparatus,
Yes.
right? So, it's when somebody says I have, I have a fully equipped studio.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the only way to have a really fully equipped studio is to have everything that Joe had. If you're going to really try to say it's a fully,
Yeah.
again, here's the issue. You can say anything you want. People do anything they want because Pilates is a generic term. Matter of
Yeah.
fact, classical is a generic term. And,
Yeah.
and I can tell you plenty of people are now saying I'm classically trained, and it's still not close to what Joe taught.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that it's bad. That's not what I've said. People assume that because I say that it must be bad. No, that's the
No.
difference. I'm not saying what you do. You'll never hear me say that's bad unless they give me a specific and it's a problem. Like medical issue.
Yeah.
I'll comment about that because if you're not trained as a medical professional then and you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to treat something medically, that's probably because of what you learned in an exercise class. That's not really appropriate.
Right.
But when it
Sorry.
comes to,
I'm just gonna read one of his comments here, Sean. Sorry about that. Finish your thought.
well, when it comes to what you're doing, as far as exercise, I mean, Pilates can be anything, classical can be anything.
Yes.
It's just not necessarily what Joe taught anymore. A lot of it's not, and that's okay. If that's what you want to teach and that works for you, listen, people need to exercise. Whatever they're doing, if they're exercising,
Yes.
and as Ramana said, even if it's based on Joe's work, it's still better than most of the other stuff that's out there.
Right.
I firmly believe that.
Right.
So, it's not that the difference is I don't go and tell classical people that they're dangerous and they're unsigned, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them do, they'll say, well, it's science. And then I say, well, can you share that science? And nobody ever does.
Right. Right.
I've
Right.
had, I think, one or two people in the last 5 years when they've used the term, it's based on science and we know scientifically and this and that. And I've been removed from some Facebook places because I keep asking the question, well, where's the science? They
Yes.
don't, and they keep trying to come back, and they'll name call, they'll disparage, they'll do all sorts of things
Mhm.
because they don't have the science.
So it strikes me then, Sean, as what you're saying is effectively you can move with Pilates moves, you can do Pilates exercises, but I'm protecting my business and my investment, so don't use the name Pilates.
Well, that's not what I'm doing right now.
But that's
Anybody
that
can use
it
the name.
still
Anybody can use the name Pilates.
but it
I don't
still
care.
sounds like so that's what it
Well, no,
sounds
I
like
don't
though, where
care.
it's like,
Well, yeah, but it's not. I don't really
okay,
care.
yeah,
I'm trademarking names. If you
right,
try to use those names, I will come after you.
right,
Like because anybody who owns a trademark has to, or you're going to lose the trademark. So
right.
if you're going to invest the time, the energy, and the effort, it's like when you said I have control of the manual. I made the manual.
Hmm.
I paid for that manual. It cost me over $20,000
Yes.
because we had to do 2 photo shoots and we had to lay it out and we had to, it took cost a lot of
Mhm.
almost as much as it cost to buy because back then there was no.
Mhm. Just lost the volume there.
There was no easy way to do it. I mean, nobody had smartphones. When you took pictures,
Right.
you had to do a photo shoot. You use film, and if you try to do it all at once, and if it wasn't right, you sort of, if it was close enough, you used it because to do a
Hmm.
whole nother photo shoot and make it look the same was very difficult.
Right.
So,
Right.
when I owned the name Pilates, that's the way it was. I was protecting it, and that's what. If you wanted to keep your trademark, that's what you'd have to do.
Yep.
People may not like how I did it, but that's okay. I mean, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Because the, we are all here for our own purposes and our own ways, and we come from our own backgrounds, and we do what we do, how we do it, and I've tried to follow the laws and the rules.
Yes.
I try to do that as much as possible. That's what keeps things. I'm not interested in anarchy. I'm listening. There's a rule of law and there's a
Mhm.
way to do things, and if you don't do it, you can get in trouble. I'm not. I got in trouble as a juvenile. I stopped that after that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
But it seems like, I mean, just from the way that you're talking about this, that you really don't care about the fact that people have, almost vilified you in a sense for trying to protect your trademarks.
You know what? It is what it is.
Yeah.
And if that's listen, I have a lot of information. I share a lot. I do a
Mhm.
lot. I bring a lot to the table.
Yeah.
And if you don't like that, well then you don't like that. That's okay with me.
Yeah. There's a lot
I'm
of
who
people
I
that,
am.
a lot of people that love the work that you're doing and love, I find out like Tara Rose example of someone who's raves about the classes and how informational they are between you and Elaine. So yeah, exactly. You're doing the work, right?
Right. Well, and look, I lost that 20 years ago. These people are still harping on this thing that's 20 years old. I've moved on.
Yeah.
I don't, it's like I will still say things. I'll say, it's not what Joe taught because it's not.
Yeah.
If they try to, I mean, it's like Mr. Steele. He's got all this stuff in his book that is just, I mean, there's so much there that is wrong,
Mhm.
misinformed. He makes things up, and so, and the problem is people will read that and they'll think that that's really what happened, and
Mm.
it's not. It really isn't. A lot of this, document wise. And listen, I was there for his deposition and his testimony. And 25 years ago, he said he didn't have a good memory. He's like, I can't even remember my kids' birthdays. So if
Yes.
25 years ago he didn't have a bad memory, well, and then he writes a book, 20
Mhm.
some years later,
Yeah.
guess what? It's even
Yeah.
worse because now you're in your 80s and what do you really remember? I mean, come on. And the stories, I mean,
Yes.
this whole thing about sex, that Pilates is all about sex positions and this, that's how you sell a book. You put sex in the book.
Yeah.
Nobody ever, I've never heard that ever before until he writes about it. And that, and the way he lies, he talks about lying in the book. We know
Mhm.
he lied to the judge, in the lawsuit, this, he's a lawyer, right? So it's not
Yeah.
like he didn't know any better.
Right.
The judge asked him 2 times, was there a will? And he said no. Well, I have a document with his signature on it that proves that he knew there was a will, because it, to be able to sell the property in the Berkshires for Clara, right?
Yes.
They had to show, and the will says that he left everything to Clara, and he signed the document. So he knew there was a will, so he lied to the judge,
Wow. Yeah.
right? As a lawyer, So I
Right.
mean, again, there's a lot of stuff there. So,
Yeah.
and again,
I
I
hear it.
don't really, listen, if people are going to listen to what the PMA and balanced body and all that, and use that rhetoric that's been going on for 20 years later, and not, be open enough to see, what there is. I lost my ear pod, you know, and it is,
Yes.
that, and the
Yeah.
history is the history. And,
Right.
I did
Exactly.
what I did. I can't change that. That's in the
Hmm.
past. Going
Right.
forward, I'm trying to, what, listen, I'm trying to make sure
I was going to
that
ask where
Joe,
we're going forward. Yeah.
well,
Yes.
Joe's work is here for generations to come.
Hmm.
Joe's work, not, so and, because look, what I don't understand is, if you make something up, why don't you claim it? Why, it's yours. You made it, you developed it, you don't claim it. So all these people are adding all this stuff to Pilates that supposedly is better, this, that, whatever, and it, they're saying it is, but,
Hmm.
but they don't claim it. They keep using Pilates, it's called something else.
Yep.
And I see
Yeah.
a lot of that. That's, there's a lot of people now, and it's funny because there's a lot of contemporary as well as classical people that see the, the weekend or the, $10 certification, and they're
Right.
like, that's not Pilates. Well, it is,
Mm.
because Pilates can be anything.
Right.
So, and what they're complaining about, they're training it, that was the whole point. I was trying to bring up the standard.
Standardize. Yeah.
Well, not just standardize, but bring up the standard.
Okay.
And by doing that, people are complaining now that they're getting paid less and less and less. Well, if you had a standard, guess what? And you had to meet that standard, and that's what was out there,
Hmm.
that would have been better. People would have been paid more, because maybe there wouldn't have been, the $10 certification program for Pilates. It could have been a, Pilates base, but if you really wanted the real deal, then, you had to pay for it.
Yes.
So, there's two schools, right?
Yeah.
When you look at the
Yeah.
courts, right? There
Right.
is protect, the person who does the work, right? Which is
Hmm.
intellectual property, trademark, that's what it is. Or,
Yes.
it's, you give it up, and it's for the consumers, and we're a consumer based, society, right? So but
Exactly.
the difference is now it's buyer beware, and that's exactly what it is.
Hmm.
If you don't know what's going on, then it's buyer beware. And there's a
Right.
lot of stuff out there called Pilates, and I can't tell
Hmm.
you how many people have come to me and said, I feel like I got ripped off after they've either done a workshop or done the training with me, because they're like, I thought I was getting Pilates, but they were getting whatever
Yeah.
version that was, but it wasn't what Joe taught.
Right. Exactly. Well, I mean, it is in a very wide regard a wild west, and we're right up on the hour here. But I was thinking about what you're saying is that, but there at the same time, there are people who are passionate about like yourself, understanding, Joe's work and all these different things. I can think of some teachers who are passionate about that, who are really, yeah, passionate about like continuing to work and understanding its roots. So it's not necessarily far off what Joe intended. Like when they come back to, like you're saying, Joe's work. So it's just interesting that in this, like I said it earlier, there's a notion of protecting your business, and there's a notion of celebrating a movement about movement.
Well, I'm celebrating it every day.
Yeah.
I'm doing workshops, I'm doing trainings, we're doing the pillow, we're trying to do that. I'm doing that more for studio teachers than I am for people who want to come and take it and then go out and teach it,
Hmm.
as their own, which, happens all the time. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many people I've seen, teachers who go and take a workshop, and then, a couple of weeks later, they're out teaching that, and don't tell anybody that where it came from. None of that happens anymore.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, or, well,
I mean,
very
yeah.
few,
Yes.
very few.
Hmm.
Most
Hmm.
of it. So, and I see it, and that's the market we're in. It
Yeah.
is what there's ethics, there's standards. Where is all that? And to me, I see that, yeah, there's a movement, but where's the movement going?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's, and if you're going to look at ethics and standards and everything else, well, then where does that come from? Where does that start? And that starts with the people who do the training and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, when you have an organization that was started, that started it by dividing, what does that say? Okay, they've changed, but, it's not run, who's it run by? It's not even run by a Pilates person, really. Maybe she is now, I don't know.
Mhm.
And she gets paid more than most Pilates teachers. I
Yeah.
mean, most of those, an organization like that gets to the point where, its goal is to make money to pay their bills and pay their, to take care of the organization more than it is for the members.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So
lots of
moving,
stuff.
yeah, I know it's, and this is like, this is why you spend every Monday talking about these different things. And I appreciate the fact that you are out there, on doing your IG lives, like you're putting that content out there so people can understand where you're coming from, and you're supporting it with history and with archives and documents. And I appreciate that as someone who appreciates history. So thank you so much for that.
Sure.
And and for your people, the people who come and study with you and all those different things, what is your message that your overarching message during the pandemic and the quarantine and all these things that are happening? What's your message
Well,
for your people?
the message is community service. When this started, there was a number of people I saw that try to scare people and take advantage and do these workshops to get them going. And what did Elaine and I, first thing we did was start doing free workshops. On how to transition and do things. We
Yeah,
started doing, we have the free reading where we go over the return to life every Friday,
yeah,
right? And then we have Wednesdays, we have our reading on, the history of
astrology.
exercise.
Yeah.
Well, no, Wednesday's the history of exercise. Right
Okay.
now we're
Yeah.
working, like I have, in buying, there's a book here where this is what we're currently reading, the psychology of personal magnetism,
Okay.
right? And let me find a good spot. So you see, it's all circled and
Yes.
underlined and all that stuff. Well, guess what? This is Joe's book,
Very
right? So
cool.
we're going
Yeah.
through Joe's book, and you can see, there's this little logo thing, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's a stamp there that says that, where is it here? Let's see. It's backwards. It
Yeah.
says Pilates Gymnasium Company. Okay, so he stamped it, and it's full of annotations and underlines and circles, and there's correlations to this, some of the stuff in here, to his writings.
Yeah.
So we're trying to go back and look at that, and then there's other books that we've looked at that were there's a book that we did that was before, published like 3 years before Joe's,
Okay.
and most of the a large majority of the exercise almost exactly, not exactly, but very similar.
Yes.
Right. And the difference was, you have 40 to 100 repetitions. That's
Yikes.
crazy.
Yes.
So, I mean, so that's what we're doing. It's like,
Yes.
uh, you know, Jacob's Pillow, right? Where we do, Joe taught for, over a decade.
Yes.
There's a real history there. Well, they had to cancel their season.
Hmm.
They had to lay off people. Everybody took a pay cut. So during the summer, we did a fundraiser. We did fundraising for them. I
Yes.
raised almost $10,000 for them.
Yeah.
And
It's
their
awesome.
and their effort and their, so what, it's, and I've that's what I've been saying this whole time. If everybody did one thing for the community,
Hmm.
we'd have a much better community.
Yes.
So what's
Yeah.
everybody doing? I mean, and the proof is in the pudding. We've been doing that. We've been doing free, every week, 3 times a week, doing free readings and things like that for the
Yeah.
community,
Right.
because it's not just financial support,
Hmm.
right? It's the psychology of personal, and it's like, what do how do we help people get through all this?
Yes.
Because it's a tough time, and
Okay.
it's personally a tough time and psychologically a tough time. So providing information, providing, I mean, Mr. Steele's thing, my debunk the bull, or
Hmm.
ask, and then I have AMAP, which is Ask Me Anything Pilates. I do
Yes.
either one
Yes.
of the two. So
Yeah.
you can do that, because I think that's important, and I
Yeah.
don't get paid for that. I'm
Yeah.
not expecting to make money from that, because that's important for people to know,
Right.
and also
Right.
to support people. The return to life reading.
Yes.
We discuss it, we talk about it, we laugh, we have people, and people laugh
Hmm.
with it. I mean, it's something to do to it's kind of like when things are bad, entertainment. is what helps you get through it.
Levity.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and we're there. We're giving
Yes.
you information. We're talking about what you do. We're laughing about it. And I make comments. I'll comment about what's happening, on social media all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially when they're coming after me, I'm like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go. I'm ready to go head to head with anybody for anything on any topic because I have nothing to hide.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I have the documents and I have the proof. That's why a
Yeah.
lot of people don't. Some of them want to, shut me up because they're afraid of what I'm gonna, because of the information that I can provide that makes them not look so good because of the way they, the things that they wrote or the things that they deposed or, what they said and about
Yes.
Romana, I, and everybody else.
Right. Man, I appreciate your time. I really appreciate you
Sure.
making yourself available to me and to, our, people who are watching, following along, and thanks for what you're doing
Well,
for the community. Like
yeah.
those are all key pieces that help us to understand our roots. So I really appreciate that.
Right. Well, listen, yes, I'm trying to make Joe's work still Joe's work, but
Yep.
I'm also done a lot of stuff to try to understand why it works so well and look at the science. I have my workshops. I've done one. Understanding Joe's work. I do my
Yes.
anatomy. All, but I look at it in a way that looks at the science,
Hmm.
right? What has been said, what is
Yep.
the reality, and then try to fuse it all together so people have a better understanding of the work that they do. That's also important. And that Joe didn't do that. So
Yes.
we
Right.
all listen. Every class you teach is a different class,
Yeah. Right.
right? And I'm never going to be Joe. I'm never going to
Hmm.
be Clara. I'm never going to be Romana.
Hmm.
I honor them as much as possible. And the difference is Joe left a body of work,
Yep.
to be able to do that. And I'm doing that. Am I doing it free? No, I don't give it away for free.
Right.
Because I own it, but I'm sharing and I'm doing workshops and I'm trying to do it. We do it, like I said, with the pillow, other things. One of the things I'm working on eventually is, I've been doing, the training I've done. I developed with Romana with the manual that
Yes.
continues.
Hmm.
And then I'm working on, an advanced training, which is going to be Joe's training. Using
Yeah.
the archives to really look at, how he did it because, Romana changed it some. Everybody else changed it. Well, what did Joe
Right.
really document and put out there? And that's going
Yes.
to be, that's going to be its own separate training,
Right.
advanced
Right.
training.
Yeah.
So
I have so many more questions for you, man.
I'm
But
sure.
yeah, that's
Well,
good.
if I'm happy to come back and, if you have other questions, I'm happy to answer it. Like I said, I'm not afraid of anything and I have
Yeah,
nothing to
yeah,
hide. And,
yeah,
let's put it out. Let's put it on the table and let's discuss it because
absolutely.
that doesn't happen often.
Right. Yeah, it's
And,
true.
people don't, and listen, I know some people don't like my style, but
Mhm.
I'm not going to change for them because they don't like my style. This is who I am. Why,
Right, right, right.
I don't expect you to change for me. I'm not going to change for you. Let's have a dialogue. Let's have a discussion and let's,
Yes.
agree to agree or disagree or,
Right,
that's a professional way of doing things.
right.
But, what happens is, people, the biggest issue is on social media is that you don't even have this where we can look at each other.
Yes, yeah.
So you can't see my, because when I speak and you see me smile when I say something, well, when I'm typing, you don't see that.
Right,
So
exactly.
somebody may take it the wrong way or the right way.
Yes.
There's all
Yep,
these things happening. So there's a lot of
absolutely.
back and forth. And then, but that's not how it should be.
Right.
People are who
This
they are.
is yeah, and this is why I like this platform. Is the next best thing to sitting face to face, but like, man to
Right.
man, eye to eye, and have those conversations and ask those questions is it's helpful, right? And people
Yeah.
are watching this and learning, and um, yeah, no, it's very good. And people are
Well,
just
look,
saying there's lots of thank yous and
right.
very interesting conversations and stuff. So people are
Yeah.
appreciating this. Yeah.
You have what you have to say. I have to have what I have to say. And then everybody watching, that's what they take home and they decide what's right or wrong or better or worse
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's really what social media is. It should be. It's a
Yeah.
way for us to have these. That's why I'm saying it. If this was available 20 years ago, I'm not so sure that the rhetoric and the dialogue and the bias that had been talked about for so long.
Yeah.
And you have to realize that after I lost, I walked away from Pilates for a while.
Oh,
You
did
know,
you?
I focused. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I still had a studio, and I still, but
You weren't in
I
the
closed.
spotlight sort of thing.
Well, it was that, and then 9/11 almost put me out of business, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
I ended up having to close a number of studios. I mean, it was because I used New York. When you grow a business, right? The one
Yes.
that's making money, then open other ones, and you support those. Well,
Right. It
New
floats
York,
everything else.
New York shut down, and I couldn't support the other one. So, either people bought me out, so I went from 8 different studios to one.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was happy with that. I had time for my kids. All my boys are, Eagle Scouts. I
Awesome.
volunteered. I'm a volunteer fireman. I was an EMT for 10 years. I did
Wow.
community service. I did a
Yeah,
lot of things for the community and for my kids and everything else. And I'm okay with that.
yeah,
But then somebody got me to go on social media, and I saw the rhetoric and the crap and the
yeah,
BS.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
it's time to debunk the bull.
yeah, yeah. You're ready for a good fight, eh? That's good.
Well, it's not a fight. It's not a fight. This is the
Yeah,
thing. Everybody thinks it's fights. It's not really a fight. It's dialogue and setting the record straight.
yes.
That's what's
Yeah,
important.
yeah,
This is how I am. I mean, I'm not yelling. I'm not screaming.
yeah,
I'll go head to head with anybody.
yeah,
And let's figure it out, and let's come up with it. Because maybe I'm not saying I can't learn anything. If you got something that shows that I'm wrong, I'm the first to agree with you and say, okay, great,
yeah, yeah.
I'm wrong.
Right.
But there's opinion, and then there's facts, and there's documents. All that stuff has to be considered and looked at. It's not just and what's happened is that you've had dialogue for so long and bias for so long that it's real. It's systemic in the system.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it really is.
It is.
And
It
and
is.
so that's what people think. So now they have a choice, and I have the documents to help you understand it better.
Yeah. Can I just ask one more question? I hope it doesn't
Sure.
open up like a whole like new can of worms, but what's your social commentary on this whole thing with like systemic racism in the Pilates industry today?
Well,
Where, and sorry, let me just clarify that. Like in terms of like, the pictures, like, it has to be a skinny white, blonde girl on the cover, and it has to be
I'll be
certain
right back.
people
Let me
at,
talking.
certain people at conferences, but not others. People like those sort of things where you could feel that there's a blocking off of Black people from being the in the spotlight in the industry.
See that? What do you see?
Uh, the Pilates method, is that what it says? There's a bit of
No,
a glare.
Pilates method of body conditioning. This was
Okay.
printed in, when did I do it? 1999, I think. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
99.
Okay.
Who's on the cover there?
There's a glare. I can't see it.
Okay, Brett Howard,
Okay.
man of color.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had elderly. I had so I've never been prejudiced of somebody's skin or color.
Right. But I was talking about the
But
industry at large, not necessarily you, but just a commentary on
well,
the
yeah, but
industry itself, generally
the
speaking.
industry, but that's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
People of color, right? Different,
Mm-hmm.
there's elderly, there's Hispanic, there's a black man. We train. I didn't. Joe didn't. Not train people. I mean, think about Joe, right? I'm trying to do Joe's work. Joe, Kathy Grant,
Mm-hmm.
Lolita,
Mm-hmm.
women. I mean, in his day, how many people did that? It was
Right.
very few. Well, and with Romana, with our training, Judy Chiris, I made Brett the head of my training program for years
Okay.
in the very beginning. And why? Because he had the skill and the ability to do it. And if you
Mm-hmm.
have the skill and the ability to do it, that's what you do. Now, if the industries, and the PMA, well, listen, I'm not a big fan of the PMA. I'm not a big fan of the industry in many ways because of, and I've talked about the
Yes.
ethics, all those things.
Right.
Well, those things I think are it comes from where? It comes from the source. Where does it start from?
Mm-hmm.
And look at where the PMA started and Balanced Body. Now, everybody jumps on the bandwagon. Now all of a sudden it's a problem, right? And they're all trying to do it. And I think, and that's great to do. But at the same time, what was going on before and what, so when you're looking at, the systemic issue,
Yes.
that's still those people, right? It's still
Mhm.
there. What did they do and how did they do it? Now all of a sudden they're trying to do it. Okay, making up for lost time, that's great. It's good. But, where does it come from?
Yep. And the reason why I asked that is because like you see corporations make changes, but like there still needs to be a change within the heart of the person running the corporation,
Of
right? So
course.
that's what you're getting to right there. Yeah.
Listen, my kids are of color. I mean, they're
Oh, there.
Asian.
Okay. Hmm.
My wife is Filipino.
Hmm.
I married a woman of, she's dark skinned. I dated, I didn't have a preference when I dated women. You could be, I dated black women, I dated Hispanic, I dated Asian, I dated white, I mean, I didn't, when I was, dancer and all that stuff. So, for me, it's not about color. It's about person. It's about skill. And if
Hmm.
you have that, that's what you get hired to do. And again, head of the training program. I mean, I own the business. I didn't give them the business, but I don't limit anybody in relationship to their color.
Yep. Yep.
And it's just a different shit. I mean, and I understand that. Listen,
Yep. Yep.
I went to school at Temple. Was in the slums of North Philly. I would drive through the black neighborhoods and I'd get shit thrown in my car because I was white. Bigotry happens on all sides. It's not just, there's a lot more in white, for sure, but it is not just on one, it's not one-sided. There's always both sides. You got to look at both sides and you got to look at the reasoning for that and why it happens. And then you
Right.
have to sort of try to address that. And
Right.
I've
So
tried,
yeah. Yeah.
in my business, that's not what I do. I don't, limit people because of their skin color in any way, shape or form.
Mhm. Yeah. The so yeah, I hear something I was going to say earlier on that, but just when it comes to the within the industry, like if Joe taught and had people of color and all these different things, when we see out there where someone is teaching, an organization is teaching, and it is uniform white, is there that sense of saying that's not what Joe taught? Would you speak to that and say like Joe was more diverse? Look at my book. There's a black person on the cover. There's an elderly person on the cover. Like, would you speak to that to say like there needs to be representation, like Joe had representation in the studio?
Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not about, listen, for me, it's not about, uh, what people do or don't do in relationship to the work. It's how they do it,
Okay.
what they bring to what they bring to the table. And if you have that, so I guess, see, the problem is you're saying as an industry, but you have to look at the individual. It's just like
Yes.
Pilates.
Right.
You can't look at, if we look at Pilates, it's this huge thing, but when we
Mhm.
teach it, we come back to here.
Yes.
And
You go
so, you
large
have
to
to
big to
look at,
large. Yeah.
right, you have to look at, the
Large to
individual.
small to large. Yeah.
And, I mean, I just saw somebody says, well, I still have, you still have white privilege though. I'm white. I'm not going to apologize for that. I am
Mhm.
what I am. I grew up the way I grew up. I was on food stamps. I was poor. I had no money, and I worked my way up. And maybe because I'm white, I got a better deal. I,
You did.
I got screwed too many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also got screwed many times.
Yeah.
So and if that's the case, it is what it is. I can't. I'm not going to apologize for what I've, how I grew up or what I've done. I'm
Yeah.
just not. I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think I do the right thing, and, at the end of the day, when, if there's a heaven, then we'll be judged. But, that's how, I look at that. I'll be judged, for what I've done in my life.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what it is really about.
Yeah. Yeah. So circling back to your initial message about just giving back to the community and all those different things. Um, yeah, like we're at 22 minutes over now, so I really appreciate your time. So I don't want to take advantage of that anymore because I know obviously there's other things that need to be done today, but I do appreciate your time, and I
No
appreciate
problem.
what you're doing. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going.
Well, I
Let's,
see, I guess Commando Fitness Collective. I don't know who that is, but she's not happy with me. But, that's okay. That's her opinion. She can have her opinion. She can say what she needs to say. You know what? That's okay.
mhm, yeah.
What else?
Well, just
Life happens to everyone. It's true.
yeah.
It's funny, your story. I'm going to end with one story.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. About, as a parent, right?
Mhm.
Do you have that issue with you?
Oh,
Do you
my
have
story at the opening.
yeah?
Oh
So
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
do you have an issue with your parents where they did something to you at one point that you like never forgot?
No, actually, I'm fortunate enough that I don't have that
All
wound,
right.
so to speak. Yeah.
I've had it, and
Hmm.
I've always said this to people who are parents. It's like, the reality is you can say all sorts of things, and you do as a parent, right?
Hmm.
When it comes to, disciplining or, making, because you can't just let them run. Well, maybe some people do let them run wild and do whatever. There's got to be some rules, right?
Yes.
Hopefully. And if they don't like it, at some point they're going to put their foot down, and then, you put your foot down, and to you, it's just another day, but
Yes.
they'll never forget it. And then, 20 years later, you have that deep conversation with your parents, and it's like, and I remember when you did that, and they're like, what? What are you talking about?
Hmm.
They don't remember it. And so
Right.
it's related to what you're saying, that those people, they do those things, they don't remember it, but it still
Right.
happens, and it happens in a lot of different ways. And
Sure.
it's really, it's not, to me, it's like, and I guess that's with therapy, right? Or whatever.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
happened in the past. I can't change that. As a
Well,
parent, you can't change that. You
yes.
can try to do things differently,
Yes,
okay?
exactly.
And that's, and then you can apologize for it
Hmm.
if, you did something. And if you did something wrong, apologize for it.
Own
If
it.
somebody's
Right.
doing something wrong, apologize for it. And if
Hmm.
it affects somebody, go back and, I think, one of the things that you have to do is in a lot of these programs, like I think Alcoholics Anonymous and some other ones,
Hmm.
if you've wronged somebody, they want you to go back and apologize to those people.
Yes.
That's a healing process.
That's part of the process. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is. And
Yeah.
so those things, and, you know, uh, 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 if I've done something wrong, I try to, make amends if I think, but, again, it's, I have to think the way I think because I am who I am.
Hmm. And I respect that consistency, and there's something, the other part to what you just said there about, those innocuous words that come up later and you realize it. The other part to that is there's people around who see that happen and they take up the offense of someone else. So it
Oh,
didn't
well,
so it didn't happen to them, but they take on that person's offense. And then the two people that were involved may reconcile and move on with their lives. So this other person is still trapped in that moment in the past, and they're still carrying that offense.
right.
And an example of that is from my own life, where I went through a divorce, and there is people who sided with my wife or people who sided with me. And my ex-wife and I now get along, but there's people who still vilify her or still vilify me. And you realize that there's people who get stuck in the past or stuck on an offense when the other parties may have reconciled and moved on with their lives. And so it's interesting how that's another dynamic as well, where we have to come to terms with where we are at today as well.
Well, that's a perfect analogy for me in Pilates. I've been vilified. I've been doing all this stuff on one side, and then I can tell you that there's people who then have met me and worked with me, and they've changed their tune because, and I don't worry about, listen,
You're not
when
trying to
I,
change their tune, you're just being
right,
yourself, but
right, and
things happen and time go. Yeah.
when I owned the trademark, I did what I needed to do. I don't own that trademark anymore. I don't waste my time. I'm not wasting any time trying to stop anybody from doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Unless, look, I've trademarked some other names. If somebody starts using my trademark name, well,
Yeah.
then I'm going to do what I have to do. But otherwise, I don't really care. Go do what you want to do. I mean, I have opinions. We're social media. We want to say stuff and we want to talk about things. I'll talk about whatever I need to talk about.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I've also, I don't feel um, like, what I've done has, when we're looking at what's happening socially, I think from the very, I've been, helpful and aware of that for a long time
Mm-hmm.
and tried to do the right thing, and it's not even try, here's the difference, do you have to try to do something or you just do it because it's the right thing? And
Right.
I did
Right.
it because it was the right thing, because it's not about skin color. It's about, who you are, what you have and what you have to offer. And if it's good, let's work together and make something happen.
Yeah.
Like my books, I mean, those, again, that's what Joe did. It was,
Mm-hmm.
there's a certain amount of prejudice on both sides, and there's and listen, in the sense of white privilege, yes, I grew up white, and I had opportunities, and I know, black men and black women don't have all necessarily the same opportunities.
Yes.
But I've tried to give that to, anybody. I didn't limit anybody to not have opportunities with me. That's and I think
Yes.
that's the source. I
Hmm.
say the source. When you're looking at where, when you say, is it systemic in the industry? Well, where does it start from? It starts from those people who started it, and the
Yes.
people they hire, and
Yeah.
and then it
It's called,
grows that way.
the phrase I heard the other day was a mirrorocracy,
Yeah. Well,
right?
that's what people do. People, listen, it's the king's clothes. Everybody, that they see what somebody says and then they believe it. And look, we're in a very polar society right now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I
Very
mean,
polarized.
Trump lost. It's a good thing, but you know, it, only by a couple million.
Hmm.
So when you're talking about,
Yeah.
it's still half and half,
Those
pretty
opinions are
much.
still there. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. It's still out there,
Yeah.
and that's the
Yeah.
problem, and it's and when you and how do you change that, to a certain degree without taking it too far?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, there's always a pendulum swing, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's
Right.
like they want to ban Dr. Seuss books.
Hmm.
Like, I don't get that. So there's certain things that I get and certain things I just don't get. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in 1984 where they're going to start burning books and
Yeah.
limiting what you can and cannot read. And, I mean, it go, it's there's craziness in the world right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Madness. All right,
Yes.
so I think this is our seventh close, Sean. So thank you once again for your time. And that's my other
All right.
headphones tell me that it's dying. So
Yes.
we're gonna end
All
this
right,
off,
buddy.
and I'll have you on again. Thanks so much, man. Really
All right.
appreciate it.
Thanks.
All
Yep.
right, take care.
All right. Bye bye.